I once burned a house down to the ground. It belonged to a poor old man. This happened back in the 80s when I was just 15 years old. I grew up in a poor neighborhood on the West Coast. The hood was riddled with crime and gang violence. At the time I was gang affiliated. My cousin and I were very close. He lived in a different state but was visiting. He was from a well-to-do family and stayed out of trouble. However, he had his quirks. He was infatuated with fire, enjoyed harming small animals, doing cruel jokes, etc. At times he would burn a candle and just sit over it watching it burn. He was a strange one to say the least. This particular night, my cousin was visiting. He tagged along with me and some of the other gang members. The night was slow and nothing much was going on. So, most of my friends went home. Which left me, my cousin and one other guy, let's call him Cholo, with nothing to do. One of our friends had just moved out of the hood. We will call him Joe. His grandfather's house was empty. So, we decided to hang out there. As we are just kicking back in Joe's abandoned house, Cholo starts recalling how right before Joe moved, Joe had stolen a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun from us. Of course, we had stolen the gun from someone else in a home burglary. We both become indignant, wishing we'd have gotten back at him before he left. My cousin sat listening and somewhat amused at the behavior we were displaying. He had always heard me tell stories about my hood. But, he had never witnessed it before. I suggest, in jest, that we burn down the house. Cholo gave a nod of agreement. We start looking around for something to burn the house down with. After a short search with no luck, Cholo and I are ready to give up. It wasn't something that we really intended or wanted to do. It was just small talk for us. You know, we're cool, we are bad enough to burn down this house, and they're lucky we didn't. We hadn't noticed that my cousin had left the room and broken into the shed in the backyard, until he returned with a can of motor oil. He calmly sat the oil on the floor before us and said, "This will do it." I was nervous, Cholo was nervous. But, not my cousin. He splashed the oil all over the curtains. We set fire to them and ran out of the house as the curtains burst into flames. We ran fast and far. Cholo went one way, my cousin and I another. We ran at least a 1/4 mile before we stopped. My cousin was so excited. He was laughing. He suggested we walk back another way to watch them put it out. So, we walked back to the house and sat across the street on the lawn with other spectators as firemen put the fire out. The house was completely burned to the ground. Someone pointed at us, and we ran off again. We didn't go home. Stayed out all night. The next day my mother found us walking the streets and made us get into the car. Right about that time one of my friends came to the car window and said, "Hey. It got pretty hot at Joe's last night." I just gave a head nod. My mother immediately asked what he was talking about. I told her nothing. But, when she looked at my cousin, he began to cry big alligator tears. She then drove to Joe's house and seen that it had burned down. She was so upset and began to cry. I will never forget her saying to me, "You have burned that old man's house down. He had no insurance. The only thing he had in this world was this effing house. And you burned it down." She drove us home and bitched at us all day. Made us do extra chores and whatnot. A few days after that my cousin and I stole all of her jewelry. But, that is a different confession. I did a lot of bad things during this time of my life. This probably isn't the worst of them. These are stories that I have never told my kids. I was lucky to get myself out of that environment and provide a completely different life for my children. Honestly, I don't think about it often. I know that sounds cruel. But, completely removing myself physically and emotionally from the hood is what kept me sane.